The air in the church was thick with a silence, as cold as the marble floors beneath my feet. I stood alone, a solitary figure in a black dress, watching the few relatives gathered for my grandpa's funeral. They weren't weeping. No, their faces were etched with a familiar disdain, their whispers a venomous hum in the quiet room. "Good riddance to the old miser," I heard one cousin mutter. "He got what he deserved." My blood ran cold, a fire igniting in my veins. They knew nothing. Nothing about the man who had raised me, the man they now so easily condemned. They were just vultures, circling for a piece of his non-existent fortune. But as the minister finished his perfunctory prayer and looked out at the empty pews, a question hung in the air. "Does anyone wish to give a eulogy?" Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. That's when I knew I had to speak. I had to tell them the truth about the cruelest man I'd ever known, and the hell I'd lived through with him. I had to make them understand. I just never expected what would happen next. I was 12 years old, a girl with messy brown pigtails and a heart full of daydreams, when my world came crashing down. My parents, David and Sarah Bennett, were pilots. They were the kind of people who laughed easily and loved fiercely. I remember my dad's broad, reassuring shoulders, the same ones he'd hoist me onto so I could feel like I was flying. My mom's voice was a melody, a gentle hum as she painted watercolors that filled our small suburban home with vibrant colors. Our life wasn't grand, but it was perfect. We had movie nights on the couch, backyard barbecues with neighbors, and a dog named Buster who was just as much a part of the family as I was. We were happy, but happiness, I would soon learn, was a fragile thing. A single, sharp phone call changed everything. The faces of the 2 police officers at our door were ashen. Their words were a blur, a cold, clinical summary of an airline crash in the mountains. No survivors. My dad's plane. My mom was with him. The world around me turned to static. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The pain was too immense, a block of ice that solidified in my chest, leaving me completely numb. That's when Aunt Clara showed up. She was my mother's older sister, a woman with a perpetually pursed mouth and a sharp, calculating gaze. I'd only seen her at family gatherings, where she'd always seemed to be sizing us up. "I'll take the girl," she said to the social worker, her voice devoid of warmth. I didn't know it then, but she had an ulterior motive, a desperate hope to find some hidden fortune left by my parents. She drove me for hours, the scenery growing more desolate with each mile until we reached a place that looked like a ghost town. It was a dusty, windswept town with a single stoplight and a handful of dilapidated buildings. And there, at the edge of town, was my new home, a small, rundown farmhouse with peeling paint and a rusted tin roof. I'll never forget the first time I saw him. My grandfather, Richard Sterling, stood on the porch. He was tall, gaunt, and his piercing gray eyes seemed to look right through me, as if seeing every fault. He wasn't at all what I had pictured. I braced myself for a hug, a kind word, anything resembling comfort. All I got was a curt nod and a booming voice that would haunt my dreams for years. "You're late, Elizabeth. Don't waste my time." That was the moment my new life began. A life of silence, hard labor, and a kind of discipline that would break most people. I had no idea then that the poor old man I'd been sent to live with was a secret billionaire. The moment I stepped onto that farm, my life became a blur of chores and silence. I learned quickly that Grandpa Richard didn't believe in comfort or conversation. The old farmhouse was cold and smelled of dust and damp earth. My room was a small Spartan box with a stiff bed, a single wooden desk, and a window that looked out onto a barn. There was no nightlight, no rug, nothing to soften the blow of my new reality. The only piece of decoration was a small chalkboard on the wall, with 2 words scrawled on it: "Work hard." My days were a suffocating routine, a clock wound so tight it felt ready to snap. The sharp clang of his alarm would ring out at 5 a.m. "Get up, Elizabeth. The sun doesn't wait." His voice would boom from the hallway, and I'd jolt awake, my heart pounding with a familiar fear. I'd stumble out of bed, my mind still replaying flashes of the plane crash, of my parents' faces calling my name in the rain. There was no time for grief, no time for daydreams. I'd pull on the worn jeans and flannel shirts he'd laid out for me, then rush outside to feed the pigs and clean the stables. Breakfast was always at 6 a.m., and it was a meal of isolation. He sat at the head of the table, and I sat at the far end, the distance between us as vast as an ocean. The food was simple, oatmeal and toast, and we ate in silence. There were no cheerful stories, no laughter like my mom used to share. Showing weakness was a grave sin. One day, I made the mistake of complaining about my blistered hands after shoveling manure. "My hands hurt, Grandpa," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He snapped his head up, his gray eyes flashing under his bushy brows. "Hurt?" he growled. "Men don't know what hurt is. You've lost your parents, and you're complaining about a little hard work? You'll get used to it." His words stung like a whip, silencing me, the tears I was forbidden to shed welling up in my eyes. He constantly corrected me, shouting over the smallest mistakes that my parents would have simply laughed off. "Muddy boots in the house? Clean it up. This farm isn't a pigsty." If I ate too slowly, he'd snap. "Hurry up. Time is gold. You think life waits for you to finish your bread?" Forgetting to clear the table was the worst offense. Once, exhausted from milking cows and fixing fences, I left the dishes and collapsed into bed. I was awakened by the sound of his heavy footsteps. He stood in my doorway, holding an old leather strap from the wall. He didn't hit me, but he swung it, the leather making a soft whistle through the air. "Clean it now. No one does your work for you in this life." I dragged myself up, my hands trembling as I washed the dishes under freezing water, the splashes hitting my face like the tears I wasn't allowed to cry. I struggled. The pain of losing my parents was still a raw, bleeding wound. By day, I threw myself into work to forget, but at night, on that creaky wooden bed, the loneliness would flood back. I'd curl into a ball, whispering my parents' names in my mind, begging sleep to come quickly and erase this harsh reality. My private hell was not just the hard labor, but the gnawing, crushing loneliness that made me feel like a ghost drifting through a life that wasn't my own. As weeks turned into months, something unexpected began to happen. Amidst the tears and sweat, a seed of resilience started to sprout inside me. I was still afraid of him, still ached for the home I had lost, but I was also beginning to see things I hadn't before. The farm wasn't just a prison, it was a school, and my grandfather was a ruthless but effective teacher. His lessons weren't taught with gentle words or comforting hugs, but through his actions, through the unwavering way he lived. The first lesson etched into me was discipline. Grandpa Richard lived like a Swiss clock, precise to the second. At 5 a.m., his alarm rang, and he was already out in the stables. At 6, breakfast was served, not a minute early or late. At 8, he was plowing fields, regardless of the scorching sun or drizzling rain. Once, I overslept by just 10 minutes. He stood at my door, arms crossed, his voice cold as a winter wind. 10 minutes late is 10 minutes wasted. You think life waits for you to sleep in? I mumbled an apology, my boots still damp with dew, and rushed to the pig pen. At first, I hated his rigidity, but gradually, I saw its power. When I started waking up on time and finishing my schoolwork before bed, my life became less chaotic. His discipline, though harsh, taught me to master time and live with purpose. The second lesson was perseverance. Grandpa Richard never abandoned a task. I remember a freezing winter day when thick snow blanketed the fields. I thought he would rest by the fire, but he put on his tattered raincoat and went to fix a leaking stable roof. "Grandpa, let's rest and do it tomorrow," I pleaded, my teeth chattering. He turned, his gray eyes glinting under the oil lamp. "If you start something, you finish it, Elizabeth. Work doesn't wait for weather." He kept going, each hammer blow steady, until no drop leaked through. I stood there, soaked and exhausted, but a strange feeling of respect rose in me. He didn't just work out of necessity. It was how he lived, relentless, unyielding, like an old oak standing firm in a storm. From then on, whenever a math problem was too hard or I wanted to give up from exhaustion, I thought of him fixing that roof in the snow. His frugality was the next lesson. He never wasted a thing. Leftover bread was carefully wrapped, dropped nails were picked up, and wood scraps were saved for the fire. He kept a small, worn leather notebook where he recorded every single expense. Once, I accidentally spilled a bottle of fresh milk on the kitchen floor. He didn't yell. He just looked at the white puddle and sighed. That milk is sweat, Elizabeth. One spill is one effort wasted. I was ashamed, not because he scolded me, but because he was right. He lived frugally, not out of stinginess, but because he understood the value of small things. From then on, I learned to cherish every penny. I started patching torn clothes and saving the coins I earned from helping him sell hay. He also taught me honesty and responsibility. Lying is lying to yourself, Elizabeth, he would say, his voice like stone. Is that how you want to live? I learned to face the truth, even when it hurt. And he never shirked his duty to the ancestral land, or to me. I once asked him, "Why don't you sell the farm and live in town for an easier life?" He looked at me with a pensive gaze. A person doesn't run from responsibility, Elizabeth. This is our ancestors' land. Abandoning it is abandoning yourself. His words hit me like a hammer, waking me up. I began to understand that being strong wasn't just about physical strength, but about shouldering burdens, no matter how heavy. These lessons, forged in the crucible of the farm, were the silent baggage he gave me. He was forging me into a woman, not with tender love, but with lessons as sharp as a blade, cutting away my weakness to reveal the steel within. But as I approached 18, this newfound strength would lead to our greatest conflict. The air was electric with tension, thick and suffocating like a coming storm. It was the evening of my 18th birthday. I had just gotten my final report card, a sheet full of A's and B's. My heart was pounding not with pride, but with the hope that he would finally see me, truly see me. I walked into the kitchen, the worn leather of my old art portfolio clutched tightly in my hand. He was sitting at the table, just as always, a cup of coffee steaming in front of him. I placed the report card on the table. "I got into art school, Grandpa," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "It's the best one in the state. I want to be a painter, just like Mom." He didn't even look at the report card. He reached for a stack of papers beside his coffee cup college applications I had never seen before. "You will go to a business school," he stated, his voice flat and final. "You'll study finance. It's the only way to a secure future." My blood ran cold. "No, Grandpa, I don't want to. I want to create things. I want to paint." His bushy eyebrows knitted together, a dark cloud gathering over his eyes. "Paint?" he sneered. "Foolish. Short-sighted. You want to waste your life like that? You think a few colored blobs on a canvas will feed you when you're old?" His words were like a physical blow, slicing through years of suppressed emotions. All the loneliness, all the resentment from a childhood spent toiling in his shadow, erupted inside me like a volcano. The chair scraped loudly as I shot to my feet. "You're always so controlling," I screamed, my voice echoing in the cold, quiet kitchen. "You never understand me. You never cared what I wanted. You think I haven't lost enough? I lived through hell here, doing everything you demanded. But have you ever once asked me how I felt? Have you ever cared that I lost my parents? Don't you know it hurts?" He stood up, towering over me, a stone statue coming to life. His face was flushed, his hands clenched into fists. "Ungrateful," he thundered. "You think I raised you, taught you all this, just so you could throw it away on foolish ideas? Have you forgotten everything I've done for you? I've given you a home, food, a future." "You didn't give me a future," I yelled back, tears finally breaking free, streaming down my face. "You took away the one I wanted. All you ever did was give orders and criticize. You didn't save me. You just made me an orphan who works for you." He took a step towards me, his finger jabbing into my chest. "You want freedom? Go. But don't you dare come back when you fail." His words hit me like a sledgehammer, shattering the last sliver of hope I had. There was no reasoning with him. I ran from the kitchen, from the house, from him. I grabbed my worn backpack, stuffed it with a few clothes, a notebook, and my last treasured photo of my parents. I didn't look back. I didn't say goodbye. The cold night wind stung my tear-soaked face as I walked down the gravel road, the darkness swallowing my footsteps. I was running away, but I didn't know where I was going. And for the first time in years, I was completely, utterly alone again. I walked for hours, the cold night air and the aching in my legs finally forcing me to sit under a lone oak tree by the side of the road. My anger, a raging fire just moments before, began to die down, leaving behind a cold, heavy lump of regret in my chest. His words, "You want freedom? Go," echoed in my mind, but so did his lessons. Discipline, perseverance, responsibility. He wanted me to be strong, to survive. He was right. Running away was foolish. I hated to admit it, but he had always been right. As dawn broke, painting the fields in shades of gray and gold, I began the long, humiliating walk back. My backpack felt heavy, but my heart felt even heavier. I imagined standing before him, my face a mask of shame, apologizing for my outburst. I would tell him I'd go to business school. I'd tell him thank you, for the first, and perhaps last time. But when I pushed open the front door, the house was eerily silent. No clock ticking, no sound from the stables. My heart pounded against my ribs. I found him in the kitchen, lying motionless on the floor, still clutching his small leather notebook. "Grandpa?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't respond. He was gone. The doctor said it was a stroke, a silent departure in the very house he'd spent his life preserving. The funeral was held 3 days later. The sky was overcast, as if mourning alongside me. The small church was filled with relatives I hadn't seen in years, aunts, uncles, and cousins with unfamiliar faces. They weren't there to grieve. Their hushed whispers, flat and emotionless, told me everything. The old miser finally kicked the bucket. I heard my Aunt Clara say. No one could stand him. Lived alone, died alone. My heart pounded, a mixture of grief and pure fury. They knew nothing about him. To them, he was just a cruel, heartless old man, a cold statue. As the minister finished his service, he paused, looking out at the congregation. "Does anyone wish to say something about Richard?" he asked. Silence. No one moved. My Aunt Clara looked down at her hands. My cousins shuffled their feet, avoiding eye contact. They were all there for the will, but not a single one of them could muster a kind word for the man who lay in the casket. That silence was a knife twisting in my chest, a final, cruel judgment on a man they never knew. I couldn't let him go like this, not without a single word of gratitude. My legs felt like lead, but I stood up, all eyes turning to me in a mix of surprise and curiosity. I walked to the pulpit, my hands trembling. "I'm Elizabeth," I began, my voice faltering. "Richard Sterling's granddaughter." I took a deep breath, ready to tell them the truth. Not about the money, but about the hell, the lessons, and the love I had come to understand too late. I gripped the pulpit, my knuckles white, and looked out at the sea of cold, judgmental faces. "People think he was cruel," I began, my voice steadier now. And he was. He scolded me for tracking mud into the house, for my poor report cards, for crying when I missed my parents. He made me wake up at 5 a.m., work until I was exhausted, and never offered a single word of comfort. A few of the relatives nodded in agreement, a smug look on their faces. Clara even let out a small, derisive laugh. I ignored them, my gaze fixed on the casket. "I used to hate him for it," I continued, my voice thick with emotion. "I thought he didn't love me, didn't understand me, but I was wrong." The whispers in the pews died down. The relatives shifted uncomfortably. "He taught me discipline, by waking up on time and never letting a single moment slip away. He taught me perseverance, like the time he fixed the stable roof in the snow, never giving up despite the freezing cold. He taught me thrift, because every spilled drop of milk was a wasted effort, his sweat. He taught me responsibility, because he never abandoned this land, and he never abandoned me, even though I was just an orphaned kid who gave him headaches. And he taught me honesty, even when the truth hurt." I stopped, tears finally spilling over, hot and unstoppable. He was the strongest man I ever knew. He was a man of his time, shaped by a world that taught him to be tough, not tender. I only wish I had thanked him while he was alive. I stepped down from the pulpit, my legs shaking, and walked back to my seat, a raw silence filling the church. My eulogy hadn't changed how they saw him, but it was my farewell, my final gift to the man who had forged me. As I sat there, a man in a crisp gray suit walked up to me. It was Robert Thompson, Grandpa's lawyer. He had a worn leather briefcase in his hand. "Jameson?" he asked. I shook my head. "Elizabeth. I'm Elizabeth." He gave a small, warm smile. "Elizabeth," he corrected himself. "I am here regarding the will of Richard Sterling." The words hung in the air, pulling every eye in the room to me. I had forgotten about the vultures. Mr. Thompson opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "On behalf of Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice low and steady, "I would like to inform you that you are his sole heir." He was a very private man. In fact, most of his relatives here knew nothing about his true wealth. He paused, then looked me directly in the eye. "Congratulations, Elizabeth. This is what he left for you." I froze in shock. The man I thought was a poor, cruel farmer was a billionaire. The word billionaire hung in the air, a physical weight that pressed down on me. I watched my Aunt Clara's face turn from smug satisfaction to a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. She began to shriek, a high-pitched sound of rage and betrayal. "This isn't right. He was a pauper. He lived like a beggar. You must have tricked him, you little serpent." The lawyer calmly ignored her, pulling a worn leather-bound journal from his briefcase. "This is what Mr. Sterling asked me to give you personally, Elizabeth," Mr. Thompson said, his voice softer now. "He said it was more important than any asset." I took the journal, my hands trembling. The leather was cool and smooth beneath my fingers. As I opened it, the smell of old paper and ink rose from the pages, a scent that felt like the very breath of the farm. His handwriting, firm and neat, filled the pages. It wasn't a diary. It was a collection of fragmented thoughts, brief notes, like shards of his soul. The first page was dated the day after my parents' death. "Laura and David died today. Only the girl remains. I have to take her in, though I don't know how to be a parent. I only know how to build things, not people." I swallowed hard, tears welling up in my eyes as I read those words. He had been afraid, just like me, but he never let me see it. I turned the pages, each line cutting deeper into my heart. He wrote about sleepless nights, about standing in the stable, wondering if he was raising me right with his strictness. I don't know how to say loving words. My father taught me a man must be strong, no crying, no weakness. It's all I know to teach Elizabeth. I fear she will hate me forever. The tears fell onto the page, smudging the ink. He was afraid I would hate him. He was afraid I wouldn't understand. I flipped to the final entry, written just weeks before his death, likely on the day of our last fight. "Elizabeth has grown. She wants freedom. I understand. But I want her to have a better life than me, better than her parents. I love her, but I don't know how to say it. If I'm gone, let her know I am proud. I only want her strong, so no one can hurt her." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I sobbed, clutching the journal to my chest. He wasn't the cold, cruel man I had always believed him to be. He was lonely, bound by the harsh lessons of his own time, unable to show love except through silent actions. His love wasn't a soft blanket. It was a forge, a hammer, and a fire, designed to make me strong. I sat there, feeling the world shift beneath me. The assets he left were valuable, but the journal was the true gift. It was his heart laid open before me, and I only wished I had read it sooner, when I could have looked him in the eye and said, "I understand, Grandpa. I understand now." I left the lawyer's office, clutching the journal, and stepped into the pale afternoon Sunday. The wind carried the scent of hay from afar, and for the first time, I smiled, though tears still lingered on my cheeks. Grandpa Richard was gone, but he had left me more than wealth. He had left me his lessons, his values, and a silent love I would carry forever. That night, I returned to the cold kitchen of the farmhouse. The oil lamp cast a warm glow on the journal as I reread its final lines. "I only want her strong, so no one can hurt her." I clenched my fists, feeling as though he were standing there, watching me with his piercing gray eyes. "I'll do it, Grandpa," I whispered. "I'll be strong." The next day, I began preparing. I applied to a business school in a neighboring state, a practical choice true to his spirit. The university was a new world, full of freedom but also pressures. Some nights, I stayed in the library until late, eyes burning from reading, my hands cramped from taking notes. When group projects failed, or I received a low grade, I felt like the same little girl being scolded. But each time I faltered, I opened the journal and reread his words. If you start something, you finish it. I worked part-time at a coffee shop, busting tables and washing cups, living frugally just as he had taught me. I never wasted a penny, even when my friends invited me to go shopping or out to bars. That thrift got me through tough months and taught me the value of every dollar. I also learned to be honest, even when the truth was painful. I accepted late penalties for assignments rather than lying, remembering his words, "Lying is lying to yourself." At 22, I graduated with a degree earned through sleepless nights and hard work. I didn't return to the farm right away. Instead, I used the capital from his estate to start a small logistics company, transporting goods from local farms to markets. The idea came from my years on the farm, watching him struggle to sell his produce. Starting a business was tough. Trucks broke down, clients didn't pay on time, and some shipments spoiled. But whenever I felt like giving up, I thought of him fixing that roof in the snow. I gritted my teeth and pushed through. His lessons, discipline, perseverance, thrift, responsibility, and honesty became my compass. They turned my small idea into a steady business, strong enough to let me buy a house and build a life I love. Today, I stand at his grave, not as the scared little girl he took in, but as a strong, confident woman who understands his love. My grandpa's greatest legacy wasn't the money or the farm, but the enduring qualities he passed down. He didn't teach me with soft words, but with a life of quiet sacrifice. I place a bouquet of daisies on his tombstone. The wind blows, rustling the leaves of the old oak tree, and I feel a sense of peace, as if we finally understand each other. I know he is watching, and I hope he is proud. "Thank you, Grandpa," I whisper. "I won't forget." And I know that he, the man who was both harsh and heartbreakingly human, will live on in every decision I make and in every beat of my heart,